Welcome to One Bills Lite, the miniature version of our daily show, One Bills Live, where we cram all you need to know about the Bills in about 40 minutes. Today, Steve will be challenged on the exploits of Emmanuel Sanders in the numbers game. Greg Cosell from NFL Films will break down free agency winners, and our one burning question will ask, has any AFC East team closed the gap on the Bills? Let's go!
And it's Steve Tasker who has been all over the field.
Kind of unique. He was kind of a dual-role player for you. Steve! A balloon. Steve! A blimp? We're not even in the stratosphere of normalcy here. Thanks for joining us here on One Bills Live. Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you. And free agency is officially underway in the first wave of free agency, Steve. What surprised you the most?
I think the number of how fast players out there on the free agent market perceived that the market was going to dry up when they started taking one-year deals, and I think that was the major strategy for this season. Players wanted to have a place to play. They didn't mind betting on themselves for the next season, and a lot of players did it. Levi Wallace, perfect example. Emmanuel Sanders, perfect example. Tons of guys out there who are pretty good players and who, under normal circumstances, probably could have gotten a 3-year deal from a club with a little bit more guaranteed money. But there's a perception out there that there's going to be more guys than there are chairs at the table, and guys didn't want to get left out.
Those one-year deals are usually seen in week 2, week 3, week 4 of free agency, not the first few days.
That's right.
And, yeah, I agree with you on that. I think the thing that surprised me the most was how soft the top end of the receiver market is. I know there are reasons for that.
Right.
We've actually covered that ground on One Bills Live, our daily show, and I think they are astute points that you made. Number one, good receiver classes almost every year in the draft. So the thought of not having enough supply coming into the pipeline is kind of dashed by the plethora of talent that is coming into the league each and every year at the receiver position. This year is another good year at the receiver position. And then I was surprised to hear that even teams that need a true number one receiver are not willing to pay the gigantic double-digit-a-year salaries for top-end receivers. I mean, we got through almost the whole tampering period, and Kenny Golladay, Juju Smith-Schuster, these guys didn't even get a sniff of anything.
Right.
Now, I'm sure the momentum will build for them as it goes on, but the prices are coming down with each passing day on those guys. I was just surprised the top end of the market at the receiver position was so soft.
And I think there is some merit to the point that you got this number one guy, and I get it, like the Bills have Steph Diggs, Arizona's got DeAndre Hopkins. You can go down the list. There's some quality guys out there, no question. But I think teams also feel, if they've got the right offensive scheme, that you can go with like 2 number 2s or 3 number 2s. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The ball's going to get spread around more. In today's NFL, I don't think there's any question, more and more teams are spreading it around to more and more guys. Running backs in the passing game, tight ends in the passing game, 2 or 3 wide receivers involved greatly in the passing game. And quarterbacks are getting better and better, and teams are getting more and more okay that they spread it around a ton. And so you don't really need this big marquee guy because offenses are getting better and better at dictating which matchup they're going to get anyway. So there's always one. If you got 3 good receivers, the one great receiver doesn't put you over the top quite as far as it once did.
Right, and as successful as the Stephon Diggs move was for Buffalo, and I think everybody would agree it was widely successful. Hell, the guy led the league in receiving yards and receptions and helped vault Josh Allen into MVP-like caliber of play. So a wildly successful move for the Bills, but nobody turned around and took a look at the Vikings. The Vikings drafted Justin Jefferson, who was almost every bit as productive as Stephon Diggs was there as a rookie.
Right.
And I know he's one example, but I wonder, the more that these rookie receivers come into the league and make an impact early, Jerry Jeudy, in Denver, Justin Jefferson in Minnesota, I think
Gabe Davis in Buffalo.
Right. I think it gives general managers this sense of security that, you know what, I don't need to pay $16 million a year for a veteran. I can just get the next rookie who can come in, and maybe now, I think Justin Jefferson is the exception to the rule because receivers need time to kind of get up to speed and really kind of learn the nuances of the game. But the offenses are getting simpler. They're mirroring college more and more, and I just think that an example like Justin Jefferson, like Minnesota didn't miss a beat in their offense. After trading Stephon Diggs, Justin Jefferson was fine. They drafted him, and off they go. And they were the same productive offense. Now, I could see general managers looking at that and being like, there's no reason we can't do that too.
And also, too, you look at – and it's a little bit like what we hear with quarterbacks, and they've got this window because the quarterback's on his rookie deal. You look at that and you transpose that onto the wide receiver position. It's like, listen – these guys are on their rookie deal because as soon as they're off their rookie deal, we're going to draft a couple more and put them on their rookie deal. We're never going to be overcommitted on that position, even though we're getting good production.
It's almost like it's almost turning into the running back position.
A constant stream of really good players coming out of college.
I mean, that's not good news for receivers that want to make big bank on their second contracts, but it looks like it's drifting in that direction, the way running back value is so depreciated after those rookie contracts. One of Buffalo's new additions was veteran receiver Emmanuel Sanders, who agreed to a one-year contract for a reported $6 million, and he is the subject of this week's numbers game as we put Steve to the test. And you'll be happy to know, Steve, this is about as easy as the numbers game can get. The advanced metric of true catch rate measures a receiver's reception percentage on catchable pass attempts only. Now, who determines what's catchable is obviously subjective, but I'm not going to question the analytics people. They crunch numbers better than I do. Emmanuel Sanders, Steve, made the top 20 list for true catch rate in 2020. So the only part of the numbers game that you have to get correctly here, you need to guess where you think Emmanuel Sanders ranked in the top 20. And I think I'll give you 3 guesses to start. If you're close, I might give you a bonus guess, okay? So here we go. Numbers game. Where did Emmanuel Sanders land on the top 20 list for true catch rate? This is how many passes he pulled in on catchable pass attempts.
We have to do it this way. You guys tell me, am I too low or too high on the rate?
Okay, yeah, we'll play it like card sharks.
All right, give me. He's got to be, take 10.
He is higher than 10.
Is he higher than 5?
He is higher than 5.
Is he number 1?
He is number 1 on the list, Steve. Number 1 on the list from last year in the fastest episode of the numbers game we've ever had. So listen to this.
Really? That kind of tickles me, I got to admit.
I don't know how high. I don't know what a perfect true catch rate is. You'd think it would be 100. 100%. But his number was 110.9.
How is that
I don't know what the top is. It's like passer rating is 158.3.
The thought would be that he had 10% of the balls that he caught were uncatchable.
Maybe.
You know what I'm saying? They're really like that would have been an
Again, this is out of my league in terms of analytics. I mean, I was a good math student, but I'm not doing this stuff. Like I took a withdrawal from accounting in college. I was not crunching numbers, man. That was just not my bag.
I took a total shot on the last. I was going to go up to like 3 because I was going to keep splitting it in half.
Yeah.
But he's the number 1 catcher.
He was number 1 last season.
Who was
now
throwing
he's
him the
playing
ball?
with Drew Brees
Right.
for a good portion of the season. And believe me, Steve, it's no mistake that the best season of his career was in 2014 when he had Peyton Manning throwing to him in Denver, 1,400 yards receiving and 9 touchdowns. So when this guy plays with a high-caliber quarterback, he produces. But I'm going to give you the rest of the top 10, just so you have an idea on what we're looking at here. What I noticed through this list, a lot of slot receivers, which makes sense because very often they see more of the catchable passes. They're closer to the quarterback. They're running shorter routes. They get early separation. So they're not faced with as many high degree of difficulty reception attempts.
They get a higher number of just hitch routes at the sticks. You go just past the sticks, the ball's going to be on your chest when you turn around, and that's it's easy to catch.
So last season, Emmanuel Sanders, number 1, 110.9. Second was Jarvis Landry at 100. Michael Thomas, third, 97.6. So that's 2 Saints in the top 3.
Right.
Give you a little peek into Drew Brees. Sterling Shepard, number 4. Antonio Brown, number 5. Juju Smith-Schuster, number 6. Followed by Julio Jones, Jamison Crowder, another slot guy, Tyler Lockett, and Hunter Renfrow, another slot guy. So, yeah, it's a very interesting list for those that are wondering. Cole Beasley finished 16th on this list. He was also number 1 last season in contested catch rate. For a small guy, that's pretty impressive. And then Stephon Diggs was 25th. Usually the high-volume target guys don't rank high in this category because they're throwing everything under the sun.
Yeah, the slot guys are an interesting group because they do get a lot of targets because, like I said, I was mentioning this yesterday when we were talking about Emmanuel Sanders being a separator and not an over-the-top speed guy. That slot guys get a certain percentage of the targets and the attention of an offense because you never have a drive or a game where you don't have a bunch of third downs, crucial downs where you got to get past the sticks. You got to take a quick, easy completion to stay on the field offensively. And that means quick release, 5-step drop, get it to the guy who's right here, and a guy like Cole Beasley and these Hunter Renfrow and guys like that who are quick, who can turn around and catch the ball and turn upfield and convert a third down on a short completion. They're going to get a percentage, a rock-solid percentage of the targets because of the way the game is structured on down and distance.
And as we mentioned, there's no question he was aided by having the benefit of playing with Drew Brees, whose completion percentage was 70.5% this past season. In fact, I think for career completion percentage, he is number 1 all time. But Josh Allen was right behind him last season in completion percentage at 69.2. So that excites me about what Emmanuel Sanders can bring to this offense with a high-caliber quarterback in Josh Allen, even at age 34. I think we can all agree he's going to be playing a supporting role. He's not going to be the number 1 or probably the number 2 target. But this guy is a guy that's lined up all across the formation, which had to be appealing to the offensive staff. This is a guy that you can line up anywhere on any given week, and he can deliver for you.
And think about this as well. When, say, for instance, the worst thing happens and you start losing guys to injuries, you've still got a guy like Emmanuel Sanders who can step up and be a bigger part. If you ask more of him, he's there. He's done that. So they've got some depth at that position now. They've got some flexibility, proven players. I like what he brings. I mean, I really like what he brings. I think I really like the receiving cores. They move ahead now. I liked it with John Brown, no question. But Emmanuel Sanders is...
He's like a Swiss Army knife.
Yeah.
He can do anything.
I think
he offers more versatility in the offense than maybe John Brown did. He's not as fast, although he's not slow. But I think he offers more versatility within the scope of the offense. That's not to say John Brown couldn't line up anywhere in the formation, but this guy has slot experience. So you want to go 4 wide, Steve. You double slot it with Beasley and Sanders. Whew. That's tough.
And I like this too because you bring this guy Emmanuel Sanders, and there's no way he's not going to be on the field. I mean, the guy's going to get on the field. And all of a sudden, the trend is this. It's not guys running all over the field. It's receivers that get separation like Diggs and Sanders, and it's size like Duke Williams, Kumaro, and Isaiah Hodgins. You got 3 other guys that are big targets, and I think it's easier for those guys at the bottom of the game day roster like Hodgins and Kumaro to come in and replace a guy like Diggs or Sanders. It's easier for them to do that than it is to replace somebody who's a speed guy like John Brown. Mm-hmm. Your play calls and concepts will be more similar when a backup takes the field than it would be if you've got a guy like Tyreek Hill. He's out, now you're going to put in a Duke Williams. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I think the flexibility and the creativity that Brian Daboll can use won't be compromised in case of having to switch guys in and out. I think it gives him a lot of flexibility and creative possibilities for Daboll to keep going with what he did last year. It's a great signing. There's no question about it. It's a great signing.
Time now for our discussion with NFL Films' Greg Cosell on the early stages of free agency and the teams he thinks are the early winners in terms of improvement. Greg, how you doing? Long time no talk. You doing all right?
I'm hanging in there, Chris. Yeah, it's good to be with you guys again.
Yeah, thanks for coming back on. We're going to talk to you a little bit about. We had a bunch of stuff on the docket. Then late after we got off the air yesterday, the Bills signed Mitch Trubisky. I want to get your take on Trubisky because you hear a lot of stuff from Chicago fans about how they hated him, and how he stunk. But he was 6-3 last year as a starter. I mean, what are you getting with Trubisky? There was a lot of interest in him apparently.
Well, I don't know about that because the league kind of told him that he's a backup because no one was willing to sign him as a starting quarterback or even as a compete guy for the starting job. So I think when you look at the tape of Trubisky, you see a guy that's athletic. His arm is probably a little better than average, nothing more than that. He's inconsistent with his accuracy. He's a guy that needs everything really well defined. The fewer gray areas for him, the better he can be. And obviously he's been a starter in the league. He's a former number 2 pick in the draft. But I think at this point in time, the league kind of told you what he is, and that's why he ended up signing with the Bills as a clear backup. I mean, he's not signing with the Bills to compete for a starting job. He's signing with the Bills as a backup quarterback.
Right.
Emmanuel Sanders, Greg, another precision-type route runner for this offense. Him, Beasley, and Diggs, I mean, my gosh, you want to talk about route running precision, the Bills have it in spades now, don't they?
Yeah, I've always liked Emmanuel Sanders. I think it's a good replacement for John Brown. I think Sanders is a little more versatile in how he can line up within your formation. I think you can do more things with him formationally. He's a really good route runner, really precise, a really good signing. And that's what this year has become with the salary cap going down, is you get a lot of veterans who are out there who you're not signing to long-term deals, but you get them for a year. And Sanders, to me, I remember when the Saints got him, and I thought, man, that's a really good signing for them with Drew Brees, and I think this is a really good signing for the Bills.
And what do you think about the fact that as you see this free agent market be what it is in this cap strain, Zach Ertz was given permission to get traded by the Philadelphia Eagles. The tight ends Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry go straight to New England. What about Zach Ertz, and where do you see him landing?
Yeah, I thought Zach Ertz was not anywhere near as good last year as he has been in the past, guys. I thought in terms of route running, I thought he didn't quite separate as well. I thought he looked a little slower as a route runner. Zach Ertz obviously has put up great numbers in his career, but he was never a special athlete at the tight end position. He was a really good route runner, really good understanding of how to find voids and zones, understood at the top of his route stem how to separate from man. That didn't show up on tape as much last year. Now, maybe it was due to injury. That's always hard to know. But all we can do is evaluate a guy when he's on the field and then watch the tape and see what it looks like. So we'll see. Obviously, when you don't feel like you have a great tight end room, you're looking for a tight end. So we'll see if something like this comes about.
And then I don't know what your initial impressions are of this first wave of free agency, Greg, but is there a team that comes immediately to mind in terms of saying, hey, I really like what those guys did so far?
There's been so many signings, Chris. You'd have to give me like a few teams. I mean, it's crazy.
New England's been obviously very busy. They've overpaid, in my estimation, in some cases. But you have to do that in free agency, especially if you don't have a guy like Tom Brady walking around on your roster anymore. And it seems like New England is now got to play that kind of game.
No, and it's interesting with what they did, because clearly with what they did, they're telling you we're going to be a 12-personnel offense. We're going to line up with one back, two tight ends, two wide receivers as our foundational offense, and almost play to some degree old school football. And we know there's many ways to win in the league. It's just become sort of gospel in the minds of many that, you can't play like that and you can't win, but you can win a lot of ways in the league, and that's what they'll try to do. I mean, what they have right now is they have Sony Michel. They have Damian Harris, who's a very good back. Who knows? They might get another back. You'd have to assume Cam Newton will be better in his second season. He didn't really have an off season last year, and they've got the two really good tight ends. So we know what they're going to be.
What about Nelson Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne? What about those two wideouts that they paid? And brought in.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they thought of Aguilar a little more than probably other teams. But, the one thing about Aguilar is he can run. And, it's interesting because what you often get, and I'm sure they feel this way, particularly with Jonnu Smith, one of the toughest formations now to defend in the NFL is when you have a tight end who's the single receiver to the short side of the field. And Jonnu Smith can be that guy. He's very athletic. And then you have trips, 3 receivers to the other side, and you put a speed guy as the inside slot. And Aguilar fits that role. Now, he's not going to be a volume target. He won't catch 90 balls. But that's a particularly difficult offensive formation to defend in today's NFL.
And then, Greg, we saw Will Fuller sign with the Dolphins yesterday. We know that, he certainly was a successful deep threat for Houston. I don't know. Does he match what they want Tua to do in that offense?
Well, Tua threw a pretty good deep ball at Alabama. Tua last year, I didn't think played overly well, and I thought they really kept him under wraps. And when that happens, my first thought is they're doing that for a reason because they're with him every day, and this is the way they feel that he can best function.
Right.
So we'll see. Obviously, they wanted to get better at the wide receiver position. He's gotten better as a route runner in his career, but for the most part, he's a vertical dimension. You always would love to have a vertical dimension because it changes the way the defense plays. But to me, Tua is going to be one of the most fascinating guys to watch this year.
And for the Buffalo Bills, they surprised all of us. I mean, we were really surprised that they were able to re-sign Matt Milano and John Feliciano and Darrell Williams.
Yeah.
Levi Wallace was a little bit of a throw-in there. A lot of fans were like, we can replace him, just like the Bills have thought for a couple of years. But Milano, Williams, and Feliciano, those were kind of surprising moves. What do you think the Bills are thinking re-signing those 3 guys?
Well, I think Milano's a little bit of a separate case because he's a really good player. So I think you want to sign a really good player because as we've discussed throughout the season, I think Edmonds and Milano are as good a nickel linebacking duo as there is in the league. So Milano, to me, is a really good signing. I think the thought with Feliciano and Williams is let's have continuity in our offensive line. You had a very good offense last year. I mean, obviously, I believe they would still like to run the ball better. Whether they do it with more volume remains to be seen. But I think that they really would like stability and continuity on their offensive line. Because don't forget, an offensive line gets a feel for a quarterback, particularly a quarterback that has movement ability. So you want your offensive line to feel that they have an understanding of how Josh Allen plays the position.
And we've asked some of our other guests this, Greg, just how soft the top of the receiver market has been here in the first wave of free agency. Some suspect that it's because there's this flood of good wide receiver draft classes coming in seemingly almost every year now. Others believe it's due strictly to the restrictive cap. Where do you come down on why the top of the market has been so soft and you see guys like Juju Smith-Schuster taking a 1-year deal for $8 million?
Yeah, it's obviously a combination of both things that you just said, Chris, but you're right about the draft class. College football has basically become, with very, very few exceptions, holdovers, so to speak, from the old school way of playing, but college football is spread. So you get a ton of receivers who come into the NFL now that kind of fit the way a lot of people play in the league. Look, how many times this year did we talk about the Bills and their use of 4 wide receivers?
Yeah.
How many teams now use receivers like a Tyreek Hill where they move him around so much, motion, lining up in all different places in the formation. There's a lot of those receivers in this kind of draft. And the league is, I think, somewhat moving in that direction because it makes it harder for the defense to defend. So you're right. There's an abundance of receivers. This is the kind of draft, and I've probably looked at 35 receivers, if not more, on tape already from this college draft. And there's a lot of quality wideouts who are going to contribute in the NFL.
So let me take that a step further, Greg. Do you think we could get to a point in the very near future where the wide receiver position goes the way that the running back position has in this league, where there are so many that it gets devalued because there's always more supply coming right behind the guys coming into the league?
It's an interesting question. I think you always would want to have somewhere along the line a wide receiver who you can line up at the boundary X position, the single receiver to the short side of the field, and can win one-on-one. Because the boundary X receiver, he gets the one-on-ones. Those are individual routes. He's not running routes in conjunction with any other receiver for the most part. Because he's the single receiver. So you would always love to have that guy.
Right.
The question is how many of those guys are going to be there? There may not be a lot of those guys. So, I think when you look at someone like Michael Thomas with the Saints, he was a second-round pick. Good prospect. No one thought he was a special prospect coming out of Ohio State. And because of Sean Payton's scheme and, of course, the great quarterback, this is a guy who's put up ridiculous numbers. Taking nothing away from Michael Thomas, but you wonder if there'll be other receivers who we don't necessarily look at and say, wow, they're special talents who are going to put up, 115 catches.
And when you look at these guys running routes, and there's so many receivers out there, you always have to have somebody to cover them. The Bills have been looking to replace Levi Wallace for a couple of years. They tried it with E.J. Gaines. They tried it with
Kevin Johnson.
They tried it with Josh Norman, and Levi's still there. They signed him to come back on a one-year deal. What do you think? What do you about the cornerback market out there on the free agency and the chances the Bills get a guy who can immediately step in and play?
Well, see, that's the other factor, is you're dealing with a guy with Levi Wallace who's been there now. So he understands Sean's system, Leslie's system, and you don't have to worry about teaching him the specifics of it, how to play in zone with spacing and understanding splits and route concepts. He knows all this. So unless you feel you're going to get a guy, and it doesn't mean, who knows, maybe they draft one. But unless you feel you're getting a guy in free agency who's significantly better talent-wise, and I think Levi Wallace, quite honestly, has played reasonably well. So you're not going to go that route because then you have to teach a guy. And, there's a lot involved. Look, Steve, you know that. The corner position, particularly when you play zone. Look, man is a little different animal. You say, hey, you got him. But zone, there's a lot of things that go into zone. And it requires teaching and understanding, and you have to start from scratch with that when you get a new corner.
Greg, just with respect to Buffalo's offensive scheme, we had a chance to talk to Emmanuel Sanders earlier today. He just signed his deal here in Buffalo.
Yep.
And he said, we were just kind of, I don't know if we were floored by this. That might be a little strong. But we were a little surprised because we think about all of the time that these players spend studying their own playbook, getting ready with their own game plan, repping it, studying film of their opponent through the week, all of that. And Emmanuel Sanders told us he was so enthralled by what the Bills were doing offensively, in his few moments of spare time, he would pull up the All-22 to try to figure out what exactly they were doing with their route concepts. He was that interested last year in what the Bills were doing. What do you think? Obviously, the production speaks for itself, Greg, but what do you think was so eye-catching for even veteran receivers like Emmanuel Sanders to say, hey, I want to see what the heck those guys are doing up there?
Well, I think he's probably referring to the fact that they play a lot out of a spread offense. I think he's referring to the fact that they run a lot of intermediate and vertical route concepts, and receivers like that. A lot of these short passing games, and there's a place for that, and every team has it. The Bills have it, obviously, as well. Every team has a complete playbook. But I think when you look at the Bills' offense, you see a really multi-dimensional pass game with a lot of spread looks, a lot of 3-by-1 sets, 2-by-2 sets, empty sets, a lot of ways for receivers to run a lot of different route concepts. And Sanders has been doing this a long time, so this is not new to him. There's not going to be route concepts that he doesn't understand. And bottom line is, they're a passing football team. He wants targets. That's what receivers want. He wants targets, and he knows he'll get targets with the Bills.
As before we start talking about some of the signings around the league, I just want to ask you, this a couple of days into free agency, what has surprised you the most, if anything?
It's funny. I just see it when guys get signed. I'm trying to think the early part of who signed right away. That's the thing that you always try to think about. Do you remember, Chris, who signed right away?
Yeah, the two tight ends for New England.
Yeah, New England was pretty busy pretty early.
Yeah, they were busy early. I guess I'm not surprised anymore these days. I always assume that guys are going to get a lot of money. That's the nature of the business. I know the cap went down, so there's more one-year deals. I guess maybe that's the thing that's a little more, a bigger part of the free agency this year is there are more one-year deals because the cap went down. So, when you start getting the cap going down, probably for the first time, has it ever gone down before in a long time? Certainly, I don't know. But there's a lot more one-year deals. And you see that because teams just don't have the money to give out.
Yeah, and the only other time the cap went down was the lockout year, 2011. But,
Okay.
Greg, listen, we thank you very much for the time. We're up against the clock here, but thanks for joining us again. It was good to start talking to you after a little bit of a hiatus there. We look forward to talking to you soon as we get more into the draft in the not-too-distant future because we know you're already pounding away at the film on that.
I sure am. I think I've watched 160 guys already.
Good Lord.
Okay, awesome.
I don't know how you don't.
All right, send
I
me
don't
a
know
list.
how you have eyesight.
Send me a list and
anymore.
a complete evaluation of each one. Thanks.
Yeah,
That way I don't have to.
let Greg do all the heavy
Right,
lifting. Nice,
exactly.
Steve. Very
Thanks,
nice.
Greg.
All right, guys.
All right, Steve, we close out this episode with our one burning question. And this week, that burning question is, has any other AFC East team closed the gap on the Bills after this first wave of free agency in your estimation?
Oh, I think so. I think New England has really gotten a lot better. They've got more talent. They've got guys who have been proven to be good in their system coming back off the opt-out list, and they've signed the best two tight ends in the free agent market, Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, both guys going to New England. That's big. And they've got two wide receivers that are quality guys. Even if they're not, household names, they're quality-proven pros, and they're going to be upgraded on their offensive side of the football. Their defense will get better with all the opt-outs coming back, but their offense is going to be significantly better. They re-signed Cam Newton, and I've told you this, I still don't think there's any way Cam Newton starts for them on opening day. Now, he's there as a placeholder, but he does not take the bulk of the snaps for them throughout the regular season.
Yeah.
I think there's a guy out there, don't know whether it's a veteran free agent or a trade partner that they're going to look for or a kid coming out in the draft. Sooner or later, probably sooner, the New England Patriots are going to have a different guy taking snaps than Cam Newton.
I agree. I think he's a placeholder. I think he might get to week 4 if they don't find a proven quarterback who's clearly better than Cam Newton is.
Yeah,
Short of that, I think, maybe he gets through the first month of the season. It's going to be interesting to see if I think they'll try to set up some kind of trade somewhere to get a proven veteran because I don't think Belichick at 69 years old wants to groom, the next franchise quarterback necessarily and wait another 2 years. He's trying to win now.
I think that's the truth, and I think that's a really good point, and that's what I was going to say next. They're not waiting. They want to win during that first 4 weeks of the season.
Yeah.
They want to get back in it and stay in it for the duration. I think they're going to make every effort to get a guy there they think they can win with on week 1. Now, they may think that about Cam Newton. Not too many outside the walls of Patriot Place think that.
Yeah.
But if they do, fine. But I think they are hell-bent on upgrading that spot.
I am convinced that their defense will be back in the top 10 next season. I firmly believe that just because Belichick knows how to coach defense, number one. Number two, the opt-outs coming back that you mentioned, some of the additions. They've got some young players coming back into the pipeline that I think are going to make a jump in terms of their production. Guys like Kyle Duggar, that hybrid safety that they have, they're raving about him coming into his second year now. So I think there are going to be some playmakers back on their defense. The Gilmore thing could get a little hairy if he's not traded and they don't do anything with his contract. So that's interesting. Maybe Gilmore is the trade bait to get the quarterback they're looking for. We'll have to see on that. I'm not convinced their offense is going to be back where it needs to be to win football games. I am concerned about the matchup problems that two tight end playmaking offense is going to have. And the reason why, Steve, is because, as you know, I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but they line up in 12 personnel and start pounding you in the run game, and you're like, okay, let's put our big people on the field. Right. Then you do, and now Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry are running down the field catching passes, and you got linebackers and big safeties who can't keep up with them. and then you say, okay, we got to put our little people on the field again, and then they run the ball right down your throat. That's just the game they're going to play with you, and they're going to go tempo so you can't sub. Remember the Bills here? Remember that game? The Bills decide they're going to play dime to cover Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski. I want to say it was like 2009, somewhere in there. And it was the second half of a game. It's a close game. The Bills say we're going to cover these guys so we don't get beat deep. They put their little people on the field, and the Patriots are like, okay. They ran it like 20 times in a row, just ran it down their throat. 3 straight possessions, 3 touchdowns. Game over. They lost like 56-23. I mean, it wasn't even a game. I worry about that to a certain extent, but that was with Brady.
Yeah,
I think it's different with Cam Newton, unless, as you said, they got to upgrade somewhere.
Yeah,
So,
I agree with that. And that there's a lot of unknowns now because, we're sitting here in March, and there's a lot of football and a lot of decisions that have to be made about what their roster is ultimately going to look like and who's going to play well for them, and same thing on Buffalo's side of it. But I do think the burning question was who's gotten better. There's no doubt New England Patriots.
yeah. I mean, the Dolphins are kind of hanging out. The Jets have too much ground to cover. The gap is cavernous. I mean, it's like the Grand Canyon that the Jets have to try to circumvent somehow, and that's not happening in 2021. That team is building for 2023, probably.
Right.
They're so far off the mark. The only other caveat to closing the gap in the division, Steve, the possibility of Deshaun Watson landing in the division via trade. That is the only thing that could really change things. I was talking to one of my high school buddies down on Long Island. He said, Jets fans are going nuts. They are convinced they're getting Deshaun Watson. I think it's fool's gold right now. But if you look at it, they have the most to offer in terms of capital, much like the Dolphins do. And we've had people on our daily show telling us the same thing. Those two teams have a lot to offer. Now, we've also seen the reports that Carolina is all in on trying to acquire Deshaun Watson, not only because of the player that he is, but think about the local celebrity that he is. I mean, that team plays in Charlotte, which is literally 45-minute to an hour drive from Clemson.
Certainly, Bills fans would love it if he went
to the
NFC. Outside the conference. And we had that scenario during the week where it came out that what Chicago was offering Seattle for Russell Wilson, 3 1s or 2 1s.
No, it was 3.
3
right.
1s, a 3, and 2 starting.
And we have since learned that one starter was Khalil Mack.
So.
And they said no.
Right. So I think that was the one chance that the Seattle Seahawks had of maybe getting in the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes, offering that package from the Bears that they got for Russell Wilson, adding a little bit to it from their own roster, and throwing that at the Houston Texans to get Deshaun Watson. The Houston Texans it would have been really
how
hard.
you say no to 4 1s.
4 1s, a 3, and 2 starters.
Yeah.
For a guy who doesn't want to play for you.
I probably would have done it.
I think I would have.
You got to have faith in your scouting department to refurbish your roster with all that draft capital. You have to.
Yeah.
But it didn't come to pass. Would have been delicious.
It would have been a huge trade, but they didn't do it.
Yeah. But you wonder if that sets the bar now for what Houston is expecting to accept in terms of a trade, because that's out there now, and they're going to say, 3 1s and a 3 and 2 starters for a 31-year-old quarterback. We got a 25-year-old here who's a top 5 quarterback in the league. You're going to have to up the ante, my friend. And somebody might do it.
I don't know that there's going to be
Somebody
anybody who will
might
do that. And I think perhaps it might be the one situation where, once again, if for those of us from 1,000 miles away, think that the Houston Texans might botch it by waiting too long.
They've botched a lot in the last calendar year, so
yes,
what's
have.
one more? All right, that'll do it for another episode of One Bills Lite. We remind you to subscribe on whatever podcast platform you may be listening on so you know when our next episode is ready for you. And as always, when there isn't enough time for One Bills Live, there's always enough time for One Bills Lite. For Steve Tasker, I'm Chris Brown. We'll see you next week, everybody.